Okay, welcome to another live stream. This time I am going to be modifying the encounter cards, which are like this at the moment. So we're modifying those and putting them into this format here. So I'm just going to zoom in on this format. So for example, in this one it's a bear. Each encounter card has a serial number, random serial number, and then down the bottom I have a difficulty that is a random number generated. So I'm going to F9 that just to show you, and as you can see there's a fair bit of variation. So some of these are going to be bloody difficult, and that's going to be representing things like that the bear's aggressive, that you're in its territory, that it has the drop on you and it's effectively ambushing you, that it comes out of nowhere and then smashes into your geopolitical group before you can form a defensive line. Now, some of them are, very weak, and so those ones are easy enough to take on. Now, the intention is that by having 4 in this card, that I can then have 2 of these cards. So that's where the number 2 over on the right hand side here, what that 2 represents, that I'll have 2 cards like this. Now, it's only a 9 mile by 9 mile area in each province, so really to have a huge number of bears, it starts to not make sense as to how environmental aspects and stuff like that, like territories and the population and the density of the population of a particular creature. But hey, this is a fantasy environment, and in terms of the bears eating other creatures, well, that may be that their staple diet is to eat other creatures, just like instead of just eating fruit and nuts and berries and roots and salmon, they go after bigger fish, no pun intended. So I've got the bear one done. Then I've got the bear in a lair. So that's 2 cards for that as well. So that brings the total number of bears up to 16 bears. So 16 bears in a 9 mile by 9 mile may seem excessive, as I said, but anyway. Now, giant bees, we've got some of them. Now, what I decided was that if I make it so that 1 giant bee has a difficulty of 1, and then the number of bees in this calculation can vary, and so if you encounter a swarm of giant bees, you're in a bit of trouble. Now, I've also got giant bee hives, and so the hives are a little bit more aggressive around their hive in their territory, and so that's reflected in the difficulty, which is higher. However, a bear in its lair and a bear in itself, there's loot that can be harvested, so like things like furs and things like teeth and claws and those kind of things can be bought, sold, traded, things like this. So as a loot drop for a bear on its own, it's reasonably well. It's not very much loot from a bear on its own. However, a bear in its lair, well, the fact is that 1,000 years, the number of bear attacks, the number of people who have disappeared and been hauled away by a bear back to its lair for munchies for later on, that the lair will be a loot drop that's far more substantial than encountering a bear in the field. Same with giant bees. If I make it so that the loot drop for a bee hive, but then there's also things like I've considered things like the healing property of royal jelly or of the honey itself, that that maybe that there's some kind, not maybe medicinal benefit from finding a giant beehive. Anyway, back to, we've now got boars. And I just realised that I need to make it so that you can see a 0 result here. Now the 0 result is, it's not really what I want to have. I don't want to have 0 results, so it may be that I need to tweak the calculation and make it so that it varies from 1 instead of from 0. Although I am intent to have dead creatures represented by 0 as well. So if there's a 0 encounter, then that will mean that the boar is dead, or the bear is dead, or whatever. And then I've got boar wallows, so they become more aggressive when they're in a wallow, things like this. So I'm going to make it so that, like, when you encounter a boar wallow, there may be a more substantial loot drop and things like this as well. Gelatinous cubes. So I've got gelatinous cubes reflected in the same way. Now, as you can see, there's going to be a number of those encounters. So these numbers here representing how many cards and how many groups of encounters there will be. So then I've got a sticky, which is effectively when it's like a breeding area. So you don't really want to walk into a gelatinous cube sticky because you're likely to be lunch. So there's that, and giant scorpions, etc., etc. And then I've got some blank ones that I need to fill in. So I'm going to create another window, and I'm going to move that other window over to here, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to pick from this list and then add them in progressively. So I'll get around to the undead soon, but I'm going to just go through and just do a couple of creatures, and we'll see how we go. So first thing is giant snake, and then I'm going to cut and then paste. Now a little bit on the graphics. So what I've done is I've bought the commercial rights to use these images. So these are I've purchased these, and they can be and what I'm intending is that anyone who wants to do include any artwork in Renegades, they must purchase the commercial rights to it, and those commercial rights would then be allocated to Renegade Theatre Company, so that any time that tabard, like a device, a sigil, anything at all that isn't purchased, anything that's being created, that I want to make it so that if it's being duplicated, if it's being created, printed, whatever, that the artist is being compensated for it. I want to make it so that nobody can get away with just simply stealing other people's artwork. Doing a commercial license to use artwork, it's a really simple thing to do. It's just a matter of compensating the artist for their time and energy. When it comes to exclusivity, it doesn't have to be exclusive. These images are not exclusive to Renegades. There's not really any need to. There's so much good artwork out there, and so it's really just a matter of finding a source of commercial artwork, artwork that you can purchase for commercial use, and then I need to be provided with proof that it has been purchased for commercial use. so that it can then be used on these cards, for example, or as I said, a print job at Officeworks or onto fabric or any of those things, where there's absolutely no reason for people to there's no justification for people stealing artwork when it's easy to find somebody who's talented who can do the job and it is done properly. So snakes. So I'm going to have to go and call this a snake pit. Okay, so giant snake pit compared to giant snakes. So giant snake pit will be a plus. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just going in and I'm changing the calculation so that the giant snake pit is where you've got lots of babies. Now, it also is possible to capture these creatures. So capturing a giant snake, well, giant snakes are quite handy to be used to protect and defend a stronghold, for example. The only thing is you have to feed them. So they are expensive to keep, and so just people need to be aware of that. Okay, so we're up to giant spiders. Now, I've got a few different varieties of giant spiders. So just for this video, I'm only going to use this one image of the spider. Okay. We'll leave the difficulty alone. And now we've run out of blank ones, so we need to move on from there. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to copy that and then insert that and undo that, and then I'll paste up here. Oh, sorry, I'll insert up here. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the sound so that that doesn't annoy anybody. Okay, so going down to here and then insert here, and then I'm going to delete that, and that's going to leave me with blank ones. So now I'm going to copy and paste. Oh, sorry, copy and insert. And do that a couple of times. So I've got a couple of backups. And just continue on. Alright, so giant spiders, we've got a few different varieties of giant spider. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to do the one. So I'm going to have giant spider nest. Okay, so giant spider nests are well, eggs. You can basically use these again for guarding. So it is possible to harvest some of these creatures and use them for those purposes. So yes, it is possible to get to make an income from selling creatures. Okay, sturges. So I've basically got a couple of different predatory creatures to watch out for while campaigning. So sturges, yeah, like, I mean, it's the same as giant bees. You know, you don't want to mess with them. If they catch a group of individuals, then you can beat off a certain number, but you know they can overwhelm you. So so again, we've got Sturges and we've got oops, sorry. Okay, what's going on there? So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste that. No, I'm not. So Sturge nest. It's no big deal for me to just do it manually. It doesn't really take that much more time than to do it the other way. So again, Sturge nests. You know, creatures. Some of these creatures are edible. So giant bees, edible. Sturges, edible. You know, all those things. So yes, you could cook them up. So when it comes to instead of going, oh, we've got chicken for dinner. Well, what about fried sturge? Why not? Bring it on. So there's no reason why we can't do that. So wolves. So with the wolves, you know, I'm going to basically do the same thing. It'll be a pack of wolves, and you know, really a wolf against a single individual with a spear, for example, it's most likely going to be possible for the group to survive that. But when you've got a pack of wolves and there's only 5 of you in an adventuring party, so wolf's den. So again, it's really just a matter of you know, keeping in mind that the numbers. So I'll adjust the numbers. So on the side here, I've got 2 wolf dens, and up here I've got 2. You know, for these cards. I mean, yeah. Look, the thing is that, you know, as I said, it's fantasy. It is. I try to be realistic with some of these things. Like, there's, you know, it's well and truly overpopulated to have as many wolves and as many bears in a 9 mile by 9 mile. But there's also keeping in mind that the area has been underpopulated for 1,000 years, and there's plenty of food sources for these creatures, as long as they're not too picky about what they eat. Okay, so shambling mounds are going to make it so that it's like a, well, you can effectively have a, you can be infected by shambling mounds. So shambling mound, again, it could be that it used to be a sentient creature that's been infected, and so just another thing to worry about. Just another thing to make life difficult for adventurers. So a shambling mound spore cloud. So if I basically just call it a spore cloud, it's pretty self-explanatory. Don't walk into one of those because it could infect quite a few people. I'm going to be nice enough to provide cures and things like that to some of these, because it would really suck to have people infected and not able to find remedy and eventually turn into one. But I might make it a very expensive antidote, and it may be that it takes a period of time to come back into play. But that's still a much better solution than to die or be infected or become one of them. Okay, so violet fungus. So there's a lot of stereotypical fantasy creatures that I've basically I've purchased the artwork for. They're going to have tweaks. They're not going to be, there's no point in getting old monster compendiums out, because they're not going to be exactly the same or anything like that. So people are going to need to consider that. Where are we? So that is that. That is that. That is that. Oops. So we've got spores, violet fungus, spore, cloud. So I've got spore cloud for the violet fungus, and we've got spore cloud for the shambling mound. Rot. I haven't got rust monsters. I'm not really interested in rust monsters. Infection. Area. Infestation. So an infestation rather than a spore cloud. Alright, so that's the spore cloud. We've got 2 shambling mounds. We've got violet fungus, spore cloud for that. Now, what was I going to do? I was going to copy and paste a bucket load more than just the one here and one there. So I'll do that now. Okay, so now I'm going to do the continue with creating some more. So I'll just do a few more. Okay, and almost there. Alright, that should do it for the moment. Alright, so going back to violet fungus. Okay, going down. Alright, so now we've got to delete some funguses from here. I'm just going to progressively delete so that I don't lose track of what I'm up to. Alright, so we've got elementals. Alright, I think that's all of the creatures that I wanted to do in this phase. I'm going to possibly think about doing some different ones, but we'll get to that later. So greater fire elementals. So I'm going to change the color of that. Okay, so greater fire elemental. This is something you don't want to face. Unless you're with a high priest that knows how to protect you from it. That'd be the first thing. Another thing would be if you can capture. Extremely unlikely, but there you go. So yeah, so the question is how difficult to make them. So I'm thinking $80. Alright, so there's a bit of variety there. And we'll basically put them through. Okay, so greater fire elementals. And we'll go for water next. Yeah, so I'm really happy with the change of the card to a, effectively a double-sided card, or a greater size card, or whatever. It's really just that by doing this means that it's more visual. And so what if it doesn't fit nicely into a like a normal conventional deck of cards? For the purposes of the live stream, I think it's going to turn out pretty good. Now, I am stretching the image a little bit, so keep that in mind. And so yes, I'm using the different color text and the different color background to kind of make it a little bit different from the other cards. But I mean, I could do, instead of having that one sticking out like that, I might actually do this instead. So black background and then red, black background and then blue, and so forth. Just for these ones. Alright. Okay. Alright, so you get the gist of how that's going. So there's a bit of a difference here. Right, okay, so I realized that this format that I've had with all the other creatures, well, when it comes to elementals, I need to do a little bit differently. So the first thing I'm going to do is reduce the font size down to, say, 16. Alright, how am I going to do this? I'm going to change the formatting so that those two are side by side there. Then I'm going to reduce this one here. I'm going to, oops. Okay, cut that and then paste it over here. Alright, so this one here. So the things that are important. Things that are important are the details that I'm just going to have to explain in a few moments. So we'll go and put that. Okay, I'm going to have to reduce that, put it up here. Right. And make it wider, and then I reduce this one and make it so that it's the. Okay, so that's bought us a little bit more space. A little bit more space to work with. Alright. Alright, so I need to move that up to here. And then that's given us some more space. So difficulty and all those things, I'm going to have to, well, I'll have to do something with them. Okay. Alright. So trying to get a clean slate here. Alright, back to a clean slate. Alright, now the reason I've made this space is that what I need to do is copy and then paste these. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to show up in this. I'm going to have to zoom in on them so you can see. So, not quite. I'm going to zoom in some more. Okay, you can kind of read that now. Alright, so what I've got in mind is that each elemental is going to have certain powers. So this might be uses per day or things like this. Now, so it might be as simple as that a greater elemental has 4 uses of a power per day. An elemental has 3 per day. An imp has 2, and then a spirit has 1. So it could be just as simple as that. And by doing it that way, I don't have to kind of record keep to a certain extent. Now, these ones, the font that I've selected is too small, so I'm going to go up to 8 and see if that does anything to help. Because when I realized, when I looked at the when I had them really small and condensed onto the old size of card, I lost all the you couldn't read them at all, so it was pretty useless. So by doing it this way, alright, so you can see I've got to do that all the way across. However, what do I need? What's the most important thing I need from this? So firstly, legibility. You need to be able to read what you can see. But what I do need down the bottom of these is what I need down the bottom of it is just at least, well, I'm going to try for 2 now. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have a number. Now the number that I'm wanting is either they've got it or they haven't got it. and that's not what I wanted. Alright, so we've got to undo that, and now we've got to try and copy that. Okay. Alright, now we need to take that one there and then make that there, and then copy that and then paste it to there, and then make it a block with a border. Then I need to change the calculation. And hey presto, we now have what I wanted. Now, I'm going to be might have changing this one around anyway, but I just wanted to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to paste that into these cells all the way along the bottom. All right. Now I'm going to have to, I think that I'm going to have to see what happens if I drop the font down. I mean, at the moment I've got these set to 8 point, which should be legible. So, okay, so right now I'm looking at the screen and I can read those. So that's pretty zoomed in. So I'm going to zoom out. And you can barely see them. Now I know that the font has a lot to do with it, so I don't really want to mess around with the fonts. Now this font is black, it's Vinter Hand. So Vinter Hand I'm quite happy with. I don't really want to change it to a different font, so I'm going to have to stick with what I've got here. And so that means that I have to accept that it's going to cut off certain words. So it looks like the only one I'm going to have the problem with is well, I'm going to have a problem with unless I change the actual name, but I think it's okay for them to just not show up on the screen. So you can see water protection ends and it's cut off, and so is earth. So we're just gonna have to accept that. I think that there's not a great deal I can do about that. Anyway, so I'm going to put a difficulty. Okay, we've got 8 there, so I'm going to go and make it a 4. May as well put a border on it. I'm going to copy that, paste it here. Now I'm going to change the color of that and make it white, and I may as well group it as well. Alright, so what I'm going to put in here is difficulty, and then here I'm going to put something else. So what I did previously is I put a calculation. Alright, so calculation. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it into this cell here. Okay, so that calculation there is going to do a sum of those numbers there. Alright, so then I'm going to alright, what did I do before? Alright, so copy that. Now this has got full of reference here. It's not going to really work. So we're going to start with equals, and then we're going to put that number there, which is the sum of these numbers here, plus around between, we'll go 2 and 80. Alright, so F9, 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 F9. Alright, so that's working now. Alright, so the intention is, firstly, you come up against a greater fire elemental. Now, you don't want to be the slowest runner. You want to be able to get away from these things. This is a nasty piece of work that's going to mess you up. And if if people want to be silly enough to try and take them out, they're likely to get destroyed. Could take out the entire party. So, having said that, people are probably going to try and do stupid things. Now, if you do manage to capture it, then you can see that I'll just F9 it again. So what you've got here, for example, is a greater fire elemental that has these powers. So it's got number of uses. That's got clarity once per day, deafness once per day, restore hearing once per day, etc, etc, etc. The ones that have got 0 means that it doesn't have that power. So this creature in itself, if you manage to bind it, then it's got some powers that you may be able to call on. So it's a very valuable piece of loot if you manage to get it. Anyway, so now that I've done that, what I need to do is the same thing with the other ones. So okay, so that's that. Then I've got to take that and adjust it out the way. Then I need to take all these. Well, okay, it's not going to be that easy. I'll copy that, paste that, then delete all that. Alright, so it does take a bit of time to change the layouts, but I think I've said this before in these videos. Once you've done it, you don't have to do it again. So once I've done this, hopefully it's not going to change. That if there are any changes, there'll be slight adjustments that of just aesthetics. It's not necessarily going to be a major change. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to hopefully be able to do it perfectly the first time, but it's unlikely to happen. Right, so that's that one there, and now I've got to copy that and paste that, and then I need to go and check the calculations. It's calculating correctly, and I need to check this one and check if it's calculating correctly, and it is. All right, and then I need to adjust that. All right. Now, yes. Now this cell, I've put the cell over in the black border here. The reason is that I have experimented with different methods, and it is possible for me to hide it in plain sight. Now, to hide it in plain sight, it could be that underneath this image, I could put calculations, because this is just an image file over the top of an Excel document. So all the cells beneath here can be used for calculation. Now, it's not necessary for me to do that, but because effectively I'm going to be copying and pasting values only, and then it'll strip away all these calculations, will be gone, and what will be left is whatever the last number that was in there. So for example, F9 again, and in this case it's a 29 difficulty, greater fire elemental. Sorry, it's good for me to pick it up on that. It's not a fire elemental, it's a water elemental. So water. Anyway, so we've been going at it for 47 minutes, and hopefully you've basically got some insight into how I've been playing around with Microsoft Excel. But as for what I was going to do with the placement, I'll just jump into one of the other files. Okay, that one. So for example, if I had a grid of like every single encounter in Excel in this grid formation, so I can't actually zoom it out any further than that, so I'm just going to full screen it. So imagine that is 601 encounters. So 601 encounters for the entire province. Now, if I make it so that these encounters are random, but they populate the same way, I can't work out any way that I can randomly provide a creature encounter with a serial number and do it honestly and keep some variety. The number of hit points or the difficulty of the creature, things like that. Yeah, I mean, having just a set number, set number is, I think it's going to be boring, and I think it's going to be predictable, and I think that by making it a random number, I think it's far better to do that. There's going to be, as you can see, I put the difficulty varies on the card. So the intention is that you'd process the encounter, and then you'd take out if the creature survives, you put it back into the deck without taking away any numbers or crossing out anything or putting a hole through the card or whatever means that we choose to represent that it's been processed. If the creature is captured, or if the creature is That was one of the other things as well. So I was considering that if the creature is defeated, that you mark off, and it's only once you've got to the final encounter on that card that you actually have the opportunity to capture it. I don't want there to be a huge market for these creatures. I want to make it so that they're tough, but yeah, to make it so it's the last one means that the card can actually be removed from the deck because it's been completely processed out. So the idea I've got is to put all the encounter cards onto the grid like this, and then I can put a black layer over the top of it in paint.net, and then when it comes to selecting an encounter, that I can just use the mouse, and I can then just move the mouse over the screen, and then I can hit something like this one here, which is 240. I can then zoom in on that, and then I can I can't. This is in Microsoft Excel. In Excel, I can simply go in and change the color to no color, but what I'll be doing is having these over the top of the creature. There won't be a number system. It'll just be the eraser, and I can just click on it and erase, and it might show up part of the creature effect. Now, I had in mind a little bit of a dynamic way of allowing people to get away from it and run away if they need to. That if I click on the difficulty when I've used the eraser tool, if I reveal the difficulty, that it may be that you've cited it, and it's like a final opportunity to effectively get away from the creature effect or whatever. So yeah, you've got the option of maybe fighting withdrawal or fleeing or whatever you need to do if we do it that way. Anyway, I'll end it there, and look, hopefully this has been enjoyable. Please check out renegadelarp.com for more information if you need to, and feel free to send me a message and ask me questions, and I'm quite happy to address those questions during live streams. So thank you.